Welcome back. With Rust having security issues and a lot of talks about another unicorn, I thought we should probably address that. This one is going to be close to home because I was a developer for a while. So buckle up. The delusion of solving problems. Humans usually create more harm than good. Huge urban centers give us the illusion that the world is overpopulated, although there are a lot of countries where they're full of empty spaces. Like, for example, Mongolia has 2.3 people per kilometer. It means that roughly 90% of the country is empty. Whatever someone would want to move there is a completely different question. We didn't solve the food problem. We industrialized it. We made it more reliable in huge urban centers, and this gave us the illusion that the problem is solved. Energy is another example like that. Subsidies for the so-called green energy is creating a completely different situation, like trees and in huge explorations of things like, for example, olive oil, which centuries old trees. The older the tree, the better the oil is being put down for cash. So we are really prone to tunnel vision, and one idea spreads across, and we are heavily influenced by others. Most of the time by individuals that are not that smart. Why and how does this have anything to do with this channel? Well, technology follows the same trend. Over the last 19 years, I've seen a lot of things. When I started, I wanted to be a developer, and when I wanted to work in C. Mainly, I was focusing on OS development. Since I couldn't get that far, and for many reasons, one of them being that I knew close to nothing about OS development. I've basically went through the next best thing. Finding any job in C or assembly, which were the languages that I enjoyed the most. I couldn't find any roles on that. By that time, memory safe languages were already being talked a lot more than they are today, actually. After a while, as an advice for a dear friend of mine, he basically summarized something into single phrase, actually. Learn one of these two, either C# or Java. I pended towards Java, and years of investment in C thought to be useless. Or was it? You see, later I understood that knowing C actually makes you a decent developer, not just because you basically understand what the hell is going on, and what others consider unicorns. The C developers actually know what's going on underneath. And one of the reasons why I ended up leading a 250 Java developers department, co-leading, because it was responsible for one of the parts of it. Roughly when I was 30 years old. Every step of the way, I've heard many things. Code generation platforms that announced no code required solutions. The idea of an IT department without IT personnel, without technical people, that was being sold as the cloud, was in its very initial steps. Security is, at that time, it's funny to realize that at that time, security was actually better than it is today. Although applications were quite volatile and you had quite impressive number of overflows, things were actually pretty safer. The frontiers of the networks and the infrastructure was known. They were defined. And for as long as you kept that tight, it was fairly difficult to break in. These days, you don't even have to break the company. You need to break the provider. And for some cases, it ends up being a lot easier. But I digress. After Java and C#, scripting languages became the next best thing, the future. The future is interpreted languages. And then came Go. And then everything was made into JavaScript, a language that even the author was recently quoted saying that by now it should have already been replaced by something else. Now it's Rust. Rust is going to solve all our problems. And yet the last time someone audited the Canonical's effort of replacing all GNU utils with Rust and finding a pretty hairy number of bugs, including a few serious vulnerabilities, only to realize that a lot of that code didn't have a single test case. So 7 years in development, and for the last 3.5 years, I visited roughly 10 projects a month. Sometimes actually way more than 10. Gross majority of bugs that I found had security implications, and they were developed in memory-safe languages. What I'm saying here is the problem is not the language. The problem is the lack of knowledge. I was fortunate enough to experience the development from a previous generation. And they were kilometers away from what I know today and what I see today. The lack of internet and the solutions they created protected them from dodgy solutions that you can find in your first Google query. They sharpened their minds and reduced the number of reduced languages, gave them a lot of experience. It also gave them a community that allowed them to exchange experience in a fairly different way than it is today. Actually, if you consider some of the things that I heard when I was listening, a lot of people would be offended. Something like, "That's a good looking spaghetti you have there," was something really common to hear a senior say to a junior. You can replace that spaghetti with a curse word, because I'm from Portugal. That's how we roll. But this was useful. It drove us to understand why and refuse to accept something that barely works. The occasional crash was something to be worked on, was not acceptable. Work, after a while, is forgotten and leads to solutions that we don't quite understand. I like to describe them as unicorns. And some of the quotes that got me really annoyed include something like, "Isn't the garbage collector's job to close input streams and files?" No, it's not. That I heard an insane amount of times, and it drove me nearly insane. Well, actually, one of the reasons why I left development in the first place. Years of good enough code led to the culture that we have today. Culture of hobbyist developers with a huge ego, where anyone that can build something that barely works, probably a web application, thinks that they just created the Mona Lisa of applications. The wide range of languages means that no one will ever master any of them. And if you think that I'm talking against an entire generation, think again, because I'm on that list. I know a pretty unhealthy number of languages. After 19 years in this field, allow me to say something. Rust, Go, Java, Python, Perl, Zig, JavaScript, whatever language you want to put that on, they will never address the real issue. The real issue is in the lack of knowledge, in the lack of experience. So, everyone is in a rush. And someone used to say when I was a kid that rushed puppies have hairless, rushed dogs have hairless puppies. So, if you want to be really good at something, you need to spend some time on it. You need to break your head in it. And for heaven's sake, just build test cases. I'll see you in the next one.